Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of a Beyond Seven Figures podcast. So, today we're talking about sales. More specifically, how to break free from founder led sales. Seems to be one of the most popular topics that we're hearing over and over and over again, especially from those businesses that are doing somewhere between 1 to 3 million. Though the conversation still exists with some of our clients who are doing in the tens of millions of dollars. So let's dive into that a little bit further. And with me today is my chief of staff, Joe Beecroft. Joe has been working diligently on a program that we've put together, breaking free from founder led sales, as well as a sales playbook and a template that we have. And at the end of the episode, we'll actually tell you how to get this template. We're just going to give it to you and we'll give it to you for free. But more specifically, let's kind of get into this topic of founder led sales. And we're going to start with the big one. The big one is this whole notion, this whole idea of I'm the only one that can sell this stuff. It's actually more of it's a myth that needs to be busted, right? So, Joe, let's say somebody reaches out to you and they say, "Hey, Joe, my business is different. I'm the only one that can sell this thing." How do you respond to that?
Well, I tell them first of all that they're the problem. Maybe not in that much forceful way, but if you're of the mindset that your business cannot survive in terms of sales, if it cannot survive sales wise because of you, one, you're wrong and believing too much of your own hype, or two, you're terrible at hiring and you don't believe in the people that you currently have on your team to get the results that you get, which again is a massive, massive problem to have. So either way, though, you are the problem and you'll constantly be in your own way as long as you hold on to that type of mentality.
And there'd be also a problem of managing, right? Which would be, I guess, problem number three. There's this old saying that we keep talking about over and over again. The more valuable you are to your company, the less valuable your company is. Here's another reason why you want to solve this. Because if you're the only one that can sell it, well, guess what? Then you're probably not going to be able to sell your company. Or if you do, you're going to sell it for a discount. And we don't want to do that. So, how are we going to break free from founder led sales? Well, to start, what I'll say is if you think you're the only one that can sell it, more times than not, in the very beginning, I oftentimes see founders leading the sales conversations as experts. They're giving a lot of free consulting type of advice, which is a reason why they get stuck. So, everything is so complicated. They're basically somebody gets on the phone. How can I help you? They throw in one thing or another. You could have 100 calls and 100 different sales calls. And the result of that means that very few people in the company would be able to understand everything to that depth. And yeah, it does require a founder to have to be able to sell something like that or an expert. But when you go to break free from founder led sales, you go to simplify. Simplifying equals scale. One of the ways that we approach it is what we call our three questions. What are the three questions that if you were to ask your ideal client, or what we refer to as your super consumer, that 80% of them will sit back and go, you know what, man, all three of those are relevant to me. And then you go back and you say, of those three, which one is most important? And when you're able to do that, it simplifies the sales process so that really the salesperson only has to focus in on three conversations. So let's take predictable profits for an example. Very early on in the conversation, we'll say, in typical, when agency CEOs such as yourself reach out to us, they're commonly asking themselves questions like, what's it going to take to grow my company faster? Or maybe some months are feast, some months are famine. How do we bring more predictability into our revenue? Or the third one is, look, the company's too dependent on me. How do I scale? Of those, which ones are most relevant to you? 80% of our clients or our prospects will say all three. And then we'll dive deeper and we'll say, well, if you had to pick one, which one would be most important? And we'll get a range. And if it's, grow my company faster, okay, great. Let's talk about that a little bit more. And then allows us to go into not only a deeper understanding of the problem, but uncover that solution so that we can ultimately arrive at that close. So it'd be simplification, right? But Joe, what else would you see beyond just simplification?
I think if you can't simplify Again, that's going to be a large reason or a large bottleneck to your growth. I mean, if you are a CEO that is finding yourself in a position that you can close because you're the source of all information and that you can just answer all the most complicated questions, then you've actually not built a sales pitch or a sales structure or a sales framework. You're just taking custom sales process. You're just adopting a customized sales process, which I guarantee you probably leads to a custom product on the back end as well. And to grow, to simplify, most of the time you're going to have to standardize to some degree unless you are tripling down on the idea of customization, right? And so that is not only having an effect on your sales, but it's not actually what makes you great. And it's also having an effect on your product in terms of it's probably complicated, just like your sales pitch is. So it's two sides to that. So I'd say simplifying is crucial. And as you touch on the structure of the three core elements, that's where we would start to ask CEOs in the sales seat to start to document what they do, right? Can they put it on paper what they say? Can they record their call or run it through AI and get some sort of structure to how they deliver and what they're saying? And basically, the terminology of those three is an ideal one to start with if you're finding yourself with zero structure right now.
You're absolutely correct. Again, when it comes to simplification, we believe that success leaves clues. And if you just look at some of the biggest companies in the world, and let's just take the cell phone market, right? Well, you've got Apple, and Apple more or less puts out how many phones per year, Joe?
Oh, crikey, you got to be in the billions, right?
Well, but actually produces. They produce what? One model, just a couple sizes. You get the big one or you get the small one, right? Samsung, on the other hand, I mean, how many models do they produce roughly?
A lot
A
more.
lot more, right? In fact, it's interesting. I walked into Best Buy with my son and I gave him this lesson. And I'm like, take a look at this table. Look at all the cell phones everywhere, all over this table. There's Samsung, there's Nokia, there's all these other ones right here. And he's like, yeah. I go, but which phone actually has their own section by itself? And he says, Apple. How many phones does Apple sell? He goes, one. And you notice that the Apple store is always the busiest store in the mall. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, because simplicity sells, right? Simplicity scales. You look at the most successful companies in the world and Tesla, they have the S3XY. It's very simple and they're really, really good at it. And so, in the same vein, when we look at our company, we want to be an Apple, we want to be a Tesla, we want to be simple. And so, we focus in on those three core elements. But it goes even beyond that. So now let's say you've got to the point where you say, all right, I've got these three core elements. That's great. But now I got to be able to sell this thing. I need to be able to hire somebody. One of the other problems is this assumption that if I hire somebody, that they need to have industry experience as a requirement. And as long as I hire somebody with industry experience, and they're going to go ahead and they should be able to sell my product the right way. But why isn't that the holy grail or the answer, Joe?
Oh, crikey. I mean, sales is probably one of the most complex, multi-layered departments. I think other than marketing in business, and HR don't kill me and other people don't kill me, but to do sales well, there's almost like a romantic nature of sales to me because sales is way beyond just a resume and experience. There's certain personality types that will align you to be better at a certain dynamic of sales. And sales nowadays at a certain size, we can be setters and closers. We can be account managers and just be dedicated to upsells. Sales comes in so many different forms. And so I think you just have to be an individual who is very, very able to perform on multi different layers. And resume and industry experience alone won't tell you all of those details if they're going to be successful in sales. Particularly, it won't tell you within your company and your structure and culture whether they're going to be successful at sales.
I mean, you look at predictable profits, right? Well, what we ultimately sell is, we have a system, the predictable profits operating system, which is ultimately it's the only system, the only growth system that we know of that's ever been built for 7 and 8 figure companies, right? And so that is our unique IP. That's our unique advantage point. It's what ultimately makes us different. So if we were to bring in another coach or another salesperson from another company, another coaching company, well, ultimately, they're selling it, even though they're in the coaching industry, they're technically selling another product altogether, whatever that product might be. They might have a all different methodology. and their target market could be different. I mean, we target specifically 7 and 8 figure business owners and largely the agency market. And so when we look at agencies, they have a totally different type of needs, desire, and then you match it with what we're doing and our unique advantage point. It's totally different, right? Totally different. So you expect somebody in the industry, but they're going to be talking to a different market and they're going to be dealing with a totally different product altogether. So the most important thing, rather than saying I need to hire somebody in the industry, the most important thing is, do they have the chops and the skills to actually be able to sell? And it's not just have the skills to sell. So there's things that we're able to test. And, part of when we're building sales teams is we go through an assessment process where we can quantifiably actually determine right off the bat, do they actually have the skills? But the other element of this, it's going to come down to like the process and the sales playbook and all that other fun stuff, right? Because while we can have the greatest person in the world come in to try to sell, we need to be able to set them up for success. And setting them up for success, you're going to need that sales playbook. Joe, you've spent an inordinate amount of time actually taking the playbook framework that we've used over and over again to try to simplify it and create a framework for our clients and for our listeners here. Can you just talk a little bit more about sort of this playbook, the need for a playbook, and what even a playbook is for that matter?
A sales playbook in our terminology is a document or a tool in which sales personnel can use to guide them through every asset or every facet of your sales department and sales program. Our sales playbook is going to be somewhat of an HR type document. It's going to be somewhat of an SOP type documentation. There's going to contain elements that have a very direct link to reporting and performance tracking. It's going to contain the framework or the scripts, quote unquote scripts, that we have developed at the company to help with sales presentations. It's going to cover what you need to do on a day to day in terms of general behavior and activities to successfully achieve what you need to in this role. I mean, it encompasses everything, right? But it truly is basically a one stop shop document for anybody on the sales team. It is, for us, one of the keys to unlocking the ability to break away from founder led sales, because with a tool like that, that can be used in training, can be used in the hiring process, can be referenced, you know, not only in terms of free will referencing, but can be referenced in terms of regular sales training and updated all the time. It is one of the biggest core pillars of breaking away from founder-led sales. So that's what the sales playbook is to us. We have a pretty substantial sales playbook. We've been documenting this for some time now, and it's not that everybody would need something quite as substantial as us. But either way, we're building a pretty cool template that we're going to make publicly available for anybody who wants, I think, sometime in the coming month. So anyway, Playbook is a vital tool. It can be a little bit of a beast, but we hope to make that super easy for everyone with our template we're developing.
So here's a little secret that a lot of people don't know about Joe. I should leave this as the dramatic pause and just wait so people are like, you know what? So Joe is actually a professional soccer player back in England. So was right.
Was.
And you started when you were, I think, 9 or something like that as a professional, right? And then
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
for many years, and that's part of how he got over here to the US. But if we look at professionals, like if your daughter right now was to join a soccer team, true or false, all the players would be congregated into one giant blob and everybody would be just chasing the ball. Is that right?
Crazy. Yeah, it'd be madness.
Isn't that very similar to the way that the common everyday early stage entrepreneur, when they build a sales team, kind of works like that little kid soccer player, oh, the soccer team, where they say, okay, I'm going to bring in a salesperson and the goal is just for you to close deals. And so if they're fortunate enough and have enough resource to hire a bunch of people, you've got a bunch of people all kind of tripling on their own feet, doing their own thing, just trying to get to close a deal. But then when you become more sophisticated and you become a professional and you're playing at a level like you are playing, do they leave it up to the individual player to say, hey, it looks like you've got a lot of experience. come on board and just get the ball into the goal? Or does every team that you belong to, do they have a series of plays or a playbook that they tend to use in order to drive the highest performance?
Oh, 100%. Playbooks, and I would say playbooks were introduced to me in soccer before even the professional level. And soccer is actually a really good comparison for the business world because soccer is a free flowing sport. It's not a start and stop sport, right? Not unless you're playing with a bunch of people rolling around on the ground. But plays exist everywhere in terms of we drill patterns of play over and over in different series of the pitch. And you're taught to recognize the opportunities to put that pattern in place. And your teammates need to understand the same play to recognize their position in that pattern at potentially a different position in the field, whether it happens towards your own goal or in the opposition's goal. So it's a wonderful comparison in the sense that those plays are written on a well they're on computers nowadays, but they used to be on a whiteboard, big soccer whiteboard, and there was different ones for different players. You would practice them week in week out in training. The professional difference was we reviewed footage live and people prepared footage of this happening for you in training and on the field. And then we went and played the game where we just hoped it all would come together. But the point to the comparison of the playbook is that everybody on the team was familiar with the playbook despite their position, and everybody knew where to recognize implementations from the playbook in a fluid setting. And that I think is a really, really good analysis in terms of what a playbook is to a
So
salesperson.
let's dive into that just a little bit deeper, right? So if we think about that, let's play on that analogy of soccer, right? Everybody has a playbook and they drill that playbook over and over and over again. So in a sales playbook, one of the things that you'd have would be a script, right? So you would practice that script over and over and over again. But when you get out into the field, right? When you get in the field, you know that the plays that you practice over and over and over again, when you're going up against a different team, there's other variables that are introduced. Maybe somebody is standing in front of you that you didn't expect, or whatever it is, different lineup. When you do those plays over and over and over again, it gives you a sense of confidence and robustness so that you have sort of that leeway to be able to maneuver as you want. Because I look at sort of the playbook as, you know, you want to be able to follow about 80% of it, but 20% of it, you got to have that sort of like based on whatever happens in the moment, you got to be able to make those adjustments as necessary.
But you make those adjustments best and most successfully when you are so drilled and rehearsed on the play that it becomes muscle memory. Like when I don't have to think about a third man overlap and I just know it's automatically going to happen, now I can concentrate on doing the step over or the Maradona turn in the middle to be able to then still run the same play. But now I've added something unique that's thrilly and exciting, and the crowd are going to like, and it's going to make the player I was against look silly. But I could only do that once the muscle memory of the play was so confident in my abilities to train and then execute that those things become a lot easier. The ways to maneuver obstacles become effortless. The ways to become special become easier because the foundations are there. So yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. You see that even with F1 drivers, right? You see that F1 drivers that will sit there and they'll run through simulations over and over and over and over and over again. And then there's this video, I think it was Sergio Perez, where they actually had him blindfolded or something like that and driving in a simulator. And he was able to make it all the way around the track without crashing at all because he had done it so many times. It was just muscle memory. And again, I bring this up for a reason because if you want to have a world class sales team, is your sales team, have they run through the script enough? So they have developed enough muscle memory and enough confidence that when somebody in the middle of a conversation sort of, they offer an objection, something that's stopping them. They say something's frustrating, that the salesperson has the confidence enough to be able to say, let me explore that and then go back into the script. Just like, the F1 world, let's say, there's an accident. They know how to avoid the accident and then get back, on script. All of that is really, really important. And that's when it fails. It's like when it's not practiced enough, when they don't know what success looks like. And even still with soccer and even still with the sales playbook, like all of these things that come up are also drilled. Like you drill the variations and several variations thereof. But the thing is we're intellectual athletes. Everybody listening here, you're an intellectual athlete. And as an intellectual athlete, if you were to train the same way that a professional athlete were to train, the same drilling and repetition over and over and over again, and you had your team do the same thing, the same drilling and the same repetition, your results would change. Let's go one more a little bit deeper into that sales playbook, right? Another reason why you have that sales playbook, let's say you're on the soccer field, Joe, and you guys ran something and it was like mind blowing. It was awesome, right? If it wasn't documented, what do you think your chances of you guys doing it again would be?
Slim.
Yeah, slim, right? And then if you bring in new players, what are the chances that they're going to know what you did?
Well, in a lot of times like that, you're capturing organic moments of genius that you need to then create something so it becomes a process, right? And
Yeah,
in the same analogy in sales, if you don't capture those moments, if you don't capture those one-liners that slipped out of you, but you're like, holy hell, that landed.
yeah.
You have to capture those to make them repeatable and scalable.
I had a venture capitalist one time, this was several years ago, asked me, he goes, I don't understand. The results that you guys are able to bring other businesses are so uncommon compared to what I typically see. What is that strategy? And I'm like, oh man, I'm almost afraid to tell you because, and at one level it seems so basic. And he's like, well, go ahead. And I go, we call it OSI. It's optimization, systemization, and innovation. Then he starts yelling, he goes, you effing get it. You effing get it. Right. But so the key to this whole thing is optimization. And it starts at the beginning. Optimization. Joe talked about these early moments of genius. When you're going through these sales conversations, or maybe you want to try something different, in order to do that, remain consistency across the board and make sure that things happen over and over again, like that playbook gives you the opportunity to say, hey, you know what? This is what we need to do. This is how do we have to change. And it just ensures that those things happen. Otherwise, you're leaving it all up to chance and just guessing. You said something, Joe, about the sports analogy. You said the difference between professionals and just really good sports teams beyond the sales playbook is that you reviewed the footage. You reviewed the footage. Now, where does that play, or how does that play now to a world class sales team?
If you're a founder breaking away from founder-led sales, the likelihood is that you're going to hire somebody and you're going to become the sales manager, right? If you are able to scale beyond that, then you'll hopefully get to the point where you hire a sales manager, and that sales manager will then manage the people below, right? As a sales manager, or whether you're a CEO sales manager, founder sales manager, or a sales manager, when you make that jump into the management side of sales, 90% of what you do with sales now is going to be just review, call review, and training. It won't be, to begin with, it will be setting the example and them shadowing you, but you will soon have no involvement but reviewing and tweaking and editing as a coach or a manager. And that is the biggest shift when you add somebody and then you make that shift into management is you become dedicated to the training side and you become dedicated to the review side. You don't become dedicated to being in the field or being in the game, as you like.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things we talk about quite often is that sales success is actually two broken down to two different compartments. You have sort of 50% of it is all on the salesperson. The other 50% is on the management. And to Joe's point, if you have three or under salespeople, chances are you're doing the sales management. Once you start getting, three or over, like three is sort of that gray line or over, then you really want to bring in a sales manager. Because sales managers, by the way, this is a whole other topic, but they shouldn't be carrying a quota. Like sales managers, their sole purpose should be on training the sales team, on hiring new people, on honing in and developing the strategy. The only quota, or so to speak, like they have to have a KPI, would be the sales team as a whole and how they're performing. But anyway, just to kind of go back, so 50% salesperson, 50% sales manager. So if we look at the sales manager, and it's usually the first place that we look when we're brought in and they go, something's not going right with my sales team. It's like, let's look at the management side of things. And we look at the management side of things and we go, okay, a really good sales manager should be listening to one phone call, minimum, one phone call per day for every single rep that you have in your business. And with that one phone call per day, you're scoring that phone call. You're not just giving feedback. You're not just sitting there going, "Hey, Joe, you had a great call. The way that you established rapport was really nice. The upfront contract, could be a little bit better." Because what happens is, again, we're looking for consistency here. And if you don't have a scorecard, if you don't have a process for how you're going to review these sales conversations, what happens is that it's going to vary. Maybe you had a disagreement with your wife that morning. You're in a really bad mood. You listen to the sales call and everything sucks. Or maybe life is great. You just close, or you made a little extra money, you're super happy, life is great, and you're overlooking some of the mistakes. But when you have a scorecard and it's broken down into simple things, like on a scale of 1 to 5, how well did the sales rep establish rapport? And then you score it. Anything that's not given a 5 star needs to be given feedback. Otherwise, they don't know what they need to do to get a 5 star. And it also begins to create some sort of focus. You say, all right, I am doing okay in all these other areas, but what we call bridging the gap, like I'm not doing a really good job sort of like bridging the gap. I need to go ahead and hone in on that. And then they know that focus area. But again, feedback is, and how you give feedback is another really critical part to overall success. And there's so many different elements. There's so many different questions that we get. One of them has come in where somebody says, "Well, I want to sell into enterprise, and I really want these to sell these big companies." And the funny thing about that is there is sales strategy when it comes to the sales playbook and everything, but then there's sales strategy when it comes to hiring, right? Because when it comes to selling small and mid-sized companies, at that point, you're really going to be developing and honing in that sales playbook and the sales strategy and whatnot. When you start going into enterprise, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because one of the things that you're going to notice is that for enterprise, a lot of these companies, they hire people, they take a book of business, and they just transfer the book of business that goes with the salesperson. A lot of it is shaking hands, kissing babies, because the predominant way of growing business for enterprise happens to be, are you the safest bet? It's what we call irrational buyers. So, what we're talking about here, there's the enterprise sales strategy, but then there's the strategy that's for the rational buyer, which is going to be the small, mid-sized company. Predominantly, I just want to make it clear that what we're talking about is we're talking about this as a strategy for the small to mid-sized company, those who are dealing with the rational buyer that's following that sales playbook and really able to follow that romantic dance that Joe talked about to make things happen. Is all this making sense? You picking up what I'm putting down there, Joe?
Amen, brother.
Yeah. So let's see here. Breaking free from founder-led sales. What else do you want to bring up?
I think I've been playing around with this concept of that. I think you can break everything down into what I call the 3 Ps, and that's people, process, and performance. And that's what you ultimately are solving for when you want to break away from founder led sales. And so, is the process clear, documented, easy to follow? Have I provided something that works and was repeatable and I know closes, right? People. Have I got the right people in the right seat, or am I hiring the right person? And that is such a difficult plan to go into, and that is multi layered in
How
itself.
do you know if you have the right people in the right seat? Because that's a question that comes up all the time, right?
I mean, that to me is a breakdown of metric reporting, which is the performance side of things. And then you can obviously add things like OMG if you wanted to get more detailed on personality type compared to role. But if you hone in on the people, process, and performance again was across the metrics, and do things to move the needle there, you will slowly break away from founder led sales.
So when we're looking at, let's just talk about the numbers for a minute. It goes beyond the close rate, doesn't it?
Oh, there's loads of numbers we track for sales. Yeah, yeah.
So what are some of the other things? So if I say, well, my salesperson, they're closing at, 18%. Do I have the right person in the right seat? Do you have enough information to know just by going on that?
No, no. Is that 18% on your 45-minute or your closing call, or is that 18% of total leads given for the month? What's your lead sales time to validate the 18%? Like all sorts of other questions I would ask.
Yeah, and then we got to dive in. Is it the fact that what is actually causing the issue? Are they following the sales playbook?
Are they managing the leads and the deals and the opportunities well in the CRM? Is everything well documented? Is things automated? I mean, there's a million different things we can go
The
into.
follow-up, what does the follow-up sequence actually look like?
Preheating? Are we preheating? Are we doing any type of, yeah, is there opportunity for quote unquote cold calling or warm calling? Yeah, I love sales. I think, like, you're right. I came over here for soccer and then I got more heavily involved in operations as chief of staff. But I cut my bread on sales before I did any of that, on really, really rough sales all the way through to very high end sales. And I think the most successful companies I ever worked for are ones that had a playbook that was treated like a holy document. And there was
Yeah.
almost a culture around a document. There was incredible buy-in. It became the black book, as it was known in some businesses, and it was like our secret sauce. And people really put it on a pedestal. And I think that's what you want to look for as well, is making this culturally something that's super fun and not a manual, but the secret sauce to achieving incredible results here, which should put money in your pocket, right?
Yeah. No, you're right. What Joe's saying is not just, it's the black book. So you got to know, are they following the sales playbook? Right? So that's number one. I mean, we just audited another company's sales team because they asked the same thing. Do we have the right people in the right seat? What we found was two of the closers that they have having totally different conversations. It didn't even seem like they were selling the same product. It was that widely different, right?
Were they both following the playbook, or was
Nobody
just
was
one of them
following the
following the
playbook.
playbook?
Nobody
I
was
mean,
following the playbook. So that becomes a management issue in and of itself, right?
yeah, and you can also operationalize that as well. Like, we use HubSpot as our CRM, and when our sales team are on the respective calls, there's a respective, they call it a playbook as well. But there's a playbook within HubSpot where it matches the framework of the call, and you have to fill out certain milestones along the way, which also emphasizes the structure, right? Or if you move over something, it provides you with an opportunity to make sure you can organically go back and get that information. So there's definitely an operational way to get around that as well. But if you haven't got the written playbook, you haven't got the CRM based playbook, and then you've not got the call recordings being tracked and looked at, then crikey, you're gonna. That's not surprising that you've got people freestyling.
Yeah, and there's things that they can control, the things that they can't control. If you're not tracking their activities and what they're doing throughout the day, and I know one of the things that we look at all the time is like, follow up, and are they following up when they should be following up? What does the quality of the follow up look like? Is marketing doing the retargeting in order to stay top of mind? Has the consumption strategy been built into play? Are they leveraging, especially if you're B2B? Are they leveraging LinkedIn? Did they connect with the prospects? Are they engaging with the prospects? Like there's so many different elements. And while this might actually sound complicated, so to speak, here's what we know. Most people don't do what's required in order to create a world-class sales environment. And sure, there's a lot of moving parts, but actually, when you really look at it, it's a lot more simple than it might sound right now. And when you have the playbook, it's as simple as step one, step two, step three. And then the sales manager, did they follow step one, step two, step three? And everything flows so much smoother. But I can't emphasize this enough. Breaking free from founder led sales is not something that you just decide to do on a whim, wake up one morning and figure you're going to throw something up on LinkedIn or Indeed, hire somebody, and expect them to be successful. No, you got to put intentionality behind it. You've got to build the sales playbook modeled after what you already know works. Then you document it and then you follow the sales playbook. Make sure that you can actually close following, your sales playbook. Then you bring somebody in, and interviewing is a whole other conversation that we'll have. But there's a way to interview to make sure that, statistically speaking, you're stacking the odds in your favor. But then training and how you train them on the sales playbook. And just as Joe mentioned earlier, going through it over and over and over again, building that muscle memory, because then they build confidence in the conversation. And then as they build confidence in that conversation and they start handling calls in themselves, then it's about Joe talks about that you review the footage. And so you do that. You listen to the recorded calls and you score them. And then you give them coaching. You look at the metrics, the things they can control, the things that they can't control. And that's
It's a journey. It's a journey more than it is a waking up one morning. It's a journey. But what you're also doing in doing all of that, on the other side of the coin, you are starting to learn behaviors and put behaviors in place that are required in order to be a successful CEO, particularly if you want to scale a company. It's not just about getting these things done so you can get out of founder led sales. No, you are doing behaviors that your mind should be thinking about across every dynamic of your company. Can I remove me? And can I remove this as a variable in my business? And if you can do both of those, look, I've got birthday balloons popping up on my screen. If you can do both of those, then you'll grow a really great business and you'll become a very good CEO. But it's training yourself to be a good executive as well and a good leader if you can do this type of thing and crack it. And when you do, removing that type of variable in your business, particularly if it's a variable for growth and scale, whoo, seriously cooking with peanut oil.
and there is no better feeling than getting the notification pop up on your phone that you just closed a deal and it you didn't have to touch it like at all. And that's how you build a business that's actually working for you. So Joe, we're pushing up against the clock. This is the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. What would you say is your biggest best tip for our listeners that want to take their organization beyond seven figures?
You will not do it without a sales playbook and without implementing at least the majority of the core elements of a good sales playbook, which our template can give you the core elements. But you will not break that cap until you do so. And if you do so and you are still in that seat, unless you just love it and you love eating that year after year, I guarantee you're not satisfied or happy as a CEO, particularly if you're at that point of seven figures looking to go even more, right? And so I think it's an absolute necessity. I think it's the next level on most executive journeys or most founder journeys. And it's something that the longer you procrastinate on it and the longer you don't start it, because it is a little bit of a mountain, but it's one worth climbing, you're just prolonging the opportunity of you becoming greater, focusing on other things.
Hey, that's a bold word to say never, but the reality is there may be an exception somewhere, but in the 14 years since I've been really just studying and building and growing companies, I have yet to come across an exception.
I don't know why you'd want to.
Yeah, it just makes it harder, right?
Most people are burnt out at that point, right?
Yeah.
If you're still in the sales seat and your business is dependent on you at seven figures, you're probably likely, and again, unless you just love it, reaching a point of burnout, which is what we see just over and over and over and over and over. But again, starting that journey early and just start by recording your sales calls. Just start by recording them and see if you can develop a script or if you can start to repeat some sections. And you should be doing that already, really, right? But start there, get a template, start filling out the details. You'll look back in 6 months and you'll be so far on documentation in 6 months, and you'll be that much closer to, as we keep saying, breaking away from founder-led
And
sales.
it's not even just the freedom that you get. As we mentioned, the more dependent your business is on you, the less valuable the business. You're increasing the value of the business. And then whenever that decision comes around where you're ready to sell, it'll give you an opportunity to maximize your multiple because now you're able to do this.
I'll tell you quickly as well, Charlie, the other situation that if it's not people breaking away, people sometimes have the fear of, and we see this a lot in these size companies as well, of I'm not the salesperson, I'm the founder, but Bob's been here doing sales for 10 years. And if Bob leaves, we're screwed.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's not founder led, but it's salesperson dependent as well, right? And we see a lot of salesperson dependent companies as well. And again, that's amazing that you've got an individual on your team that can do that. But it's about how you can extract that type of ability and that type of process to then make sure that everybody can do those types of sales and scale. So if it's not founder led, it can be used also in terms of not being salesman dependent.
So, Joe, now let's say we promise people that they'll be able to get the playbook. and I know you're putting the finishing touches on it. So it's not 100% ready yet, but we want to be able to give it to people when it is ready. And we did promise our listeners that we give it to them at no cost. So, how can they submit their interest in this? You want them to send you a DM on LinkedIn?
Yeah, if you find us on any platform, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, you just send us a private message or an email even, and you just send us a message that says playbook. You can just write it any way you want. We'll make sure you get it when it comes out, and it should be just in the new year.
Awesome. So whether that's you can hit us on all our socials, you can hit me up on the social, Joe hit up on socials, send us an email, whatever. All you got to say is playbook, and the team will already have the instructions to know that they're going to add you to the list and make sure they give it to you.
Giving you the cheat code, baby.
There you go. Love it. Awesome. So, hey, if you're looking for more tips, strategies, and information for taking your company beyond seven figures, make sure you check us out over at predictableprofits.com. Again, that is predictableprofits.com. Got a lot of resources, and we're building more resources to help you just break free from founder led sales, get back in the growth track so that 2025 can be your best year ever. Again, that's predictableprofits.com. This is Charles Goddett with my friend and colleague, Joe Beecroft, and I will see you in another episode.